Britain is famous for its music, the bands that we've created, everything from the Beatles to modern day artists. And in this lesson, this episode of the English Right Now podcast, we're going to be talking about British bands and British music in general. And of course, it is a real conversation. So we're going to teach at least 10 pieces of vocabulary, but because it's a real conversation, there could be more. Joining me to talk about music is Rob. Hello, Rob.
Hello there, Roy.
Hey!
How are you?
This is becoming a bit of a game to out. Hey, how are you?
Very good, very good. Looking forward to talking about British music because I do like my music, and I particularly like British music.
Nice. I have a very eclectic taste of music. I must admit there are some international artists I love as well, but British music, absolutely. Favorite band, straight off the.
Favorite band? It's probably Oasis. Actually, I really like Oasis. Oh, can I have another one as well?
Go on,
Stereophonics. I've seen them play live many times. Love the Stereophonics.
Yeah. Two very classic British bands. Amazing British bands. I really like Radiohead, which is a British band. Also, a bit more. I do like Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan from America. But of course, my music taste is very much in the 60s as well, 60s and 70s. The Who, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin. My goodness, we could just go on and on and on. But what is it about? So Oasis are back, aren't they? They've come back. They've made a comeback. To come back is a return. That's a good piece of vocabulary we hadn't included. But what is it about Oasis?
Oasis, yes, they were around for a long time, particularly in the 90s, weren't they? Through to the sort of early noughties. Then the brothers kind of split up. I don't think the band actually split up, but they kind of went their own way and had their own projects, as many musicians do, don't they? But there was still that love for the band and for the music. And then, of course, there was all this gossip and speculation that they would come back together again and play music together again. That never happened until this year. Well, it was last year the tickets went on sale, wasn't it? And they sold out, straight away, just like that. Because everyone was so desperate to see them play again, partly for nostalgia. I think it's nostalgia, isn't it? When you look back
again,
you have happy memories of them playing in the past, and I think people want to see them again. I wonder how they'll be. Will they be as good as before? I don't know.
I think. I mean, it's going to be interesting as well because there's always this element with Oasis that there's potential drama. You meant, you sort of talked about a couple of things, gossip. Which is this kind of speculative, will they, won't they, this kind of thing. There's almost a kind of this feeling of like wonder around them. We'll talk about Wonderwall, can't we? But I think they actually made their comeback at the right time. I was thinking about this. I talked about this in a live class once because any later than this, and I think potentially their relevance, not relevance, but they'd have been kind of drifted. So right now, the people that loved them originally in the noughties. You said the noughties, by the way. That's sometimes what we use to refer to the 2000s in a kind of slang way. The noughties, the 2000s. There was this kind of, the age group now are probably in their 40s to 50s, late 30s to early 50s, mid to late 50s. That age group, and they have the money to go and see them any longer, and that age group would probably be too old potentially to go to a concert, so it would be lost in time. So I think they've made the right choice at the right time to come back. Have you got a ticket?
I haven't got I couldn't afford it. Well, I couldn't get a ticket for a start. They went like hotcakes, as we say. They sold really quickly.
Oh, to sell like hotcakes. Great piece of vocabulary. Sell really, really quickly. Brilliant.
Yeah, and they were really, really expensive. So I'll be happy to watch a recording of it on TV at some point. But Oasis aren't the only band. Lots of other bands, I'm going to say, make a comeback, don't they? A comeback and return and play again. For the reasons you've explained, I think people, they've moved on a few more years, but now they have a bit more disposable income, bit of spare cash.
Yeah.
And they want a good time. They still want a good time while they still can stand up and dance. And so they go and see them. There's lots of 80s revivals. I used to love music in the 80s, which is when I was a youngster. And a lot of bands from the 80s now do the circuit. They go around everywhere, playing their old songs again. And people are happy to pay money to go and see it again.
They go on tour. To go on tour basically means to go to various places performing. And we need to talk about one word: concert. So Oasis, it's a concert. So when we talk about a concert, it's usually a live performance at a specific place, and the place we often refer to is a venue.
Yeah.
This is a word we use. So there's a lot of kind of music venues around the country where there are concerts or live performances.
Yes.
Yeah. So and sometimes they go a bit more sort of out. But yeah, what's your favorite Oasis song?
Well, I do like Wonderwall. I know that's a bit of a
Yeah,
cliche. It's you can't help singing along to it, can you? In the end,
you
really,
can't, can you?
no.
And don't look back at don't look
Yeah,
back in
don't.
anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there is it's really weird because my favorite song is probably either Champagne Supernova or
Mm.
Live Forever. I love
Ah,
both of those songs. I think
yeah. Live forever.
brilliant song.
Yeah.
This is the amazing thing about Oasis. Even people that don't overly know them will recognize songs, and that's a very similar quality to the Beatles that we can talk about. Even I don't really know Oasis that well. They will recognize some songs.
Mm.
I think that's what makes them so
Yes.
amazing. But I loved
These
Oasis in the day.
these songs live forever, don't they?
They do.
They keep on playing them. As I say, going back to the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, songs from the '60s, before we were born, even get played on the radio now,
Yeah.
and you recognise them. That's the Beatles, even though we weren't around the first time they were in the pop charts.
Yeah, the charts, the music charts, which is the kind of list of the most successful songs as well. I think that Oasis, these kind of songs, they're instantly recognizable, and they had a lot of hits. A hit is a song that basically is very successful to have a hit, and we call those. So sometimes they'll put all of their songs onto an album, which is a collection of songs, and then they will release individual songs that we call singles.
Hmm.
So I think so they release a single, and that can become a hit, which is but when that single becomes very successful.
Yes, a lot of
Yeah,
these,
I
just
mean,
to bring it up to date, a lot of these are downloads now, aren't they? As opposed to
yes,
a
they are.
CD or even older, a vinyl record. Now it's all about which songs are downloaded.
Yes, the
On your phone.
most downloaded or the most played song.
Yeah.
So a lot of students get confused with the words music and song, but they are different. So music is the kind of art form, and it's sort of the collection of things like rhythm, melody, harmony. It's a collection of sounds. So it's the general idea to make music is to create sounds, whereas a song is a specific type of music, often related to a specific genre, and it combines kind of vocals, not always, but vocals and instruments, and it's structured with kind of words which we refer to as lyrics. So to give you an idea, you make music, it's making sounds, whereas a song is something like Wonderwall. That is a specific song. A song is an individual sort of recording with words and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Of course, we are talking about British music here. What's special about
yes,
British music compared with American music or any other nationality, really? I think British music is certainly very popular around the world, generally speaking.
yes.
Is it because of the quality? I don't know.
I think I think it's we talk about. I mean, America's had amazing music as well.
Hmm.
But there were I would say there was I never liked this term, but musical revolutions. This kind of idea where something immediately kind of came out of nowhere. And I would definitely say that a music movement is probably a better term. And there were
Yes.
quite a
Yes.
few. So like in terms of like the bands of the 60s, suddenly Britain out of nowhere became quite prolific. There
Hmm.
were so many British bands that just the sheer like the number of bands was incredible during that period. You had the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who.
Hmm.
It just kept coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
Led
And this was
Zeppelin,
called. This
Pink
had a name,
Floyd,
didn't
and
it?
sort of
Yeah. I was going to say this had a name. This was called the British Invasion, because a lot of
yes,
British music invaded the American charts, where it was dominated by American singers. But the British had a go.
yeah. But you've got to also, I mean, in terms of America, you've also got to think about they were very big in the rap sort of scene. So they created the rap scene, the blues, jazz, very much were American music. So they had their kind of music movements at the same time. But I think Britain, probably because of the size of the place, size of the island, and well, the archipelago, with the population, the number of bands coming from such a small country, relatively, was quite amazing.
Yeah.
And I think there was a kind of, yeah, I mean, the 60s was a huge movement, and it didn't sort of stop. But for me, there were very different generations. 60s and 70s was very sort of rock and progressive rock. It's some phenomenal bands like Pink Floyd.
And
And then in the 80s were very different.
Yes, it was more. How would it was pop, wasn't it? It was kind of more happy
Yeah.
pop.
Yeah, very romantic. I think, was it the new romantic era? Would we call
New
it that?
romantic era, yeah, that's right. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of Spandau Ballet, for example,
Yeah.
ABC, that sort of thing. Going back to the 70s,
Cure.
just want to mention David Bowie, of course. He was a
Oh
big
gosh.
British singer, very famous around
This
the
is the
world.
problem. No matter how many people we name, we're going to miss
Yeah.
some. So please do
Yeah,
let
yeah,
us know in the comments your favorite British bands or music. And when we talk about bands, by the way, we're talking about a collection of people playing, like a singer, guitarist, drummer, and all this kind of thing. This is a band. So the Beatles were a band. A solo artist is somebody like Adele, who also sort of stormed the world at one point. The 80s were very much more sort of subdued music. Towards the late 80s, it started with bands like Radiohead, and well, Radiohead's a bit earlier actually, but it's interesting because in America during the same period of time, they had a very much a rock metal kind of phase. Bands like Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth were all coming through in the States, and we had a kind of very chilled period. And I think that's what led to the 90s, if I'm honest, because in the 90s it was a bit more aggressive again, somewhat.
Yes.
There was a lot of passion and energy. Even the Spice Girls were kind of girl power, let's push it. Oasis, Blur, there was a kind of real vibrancy to it, and I think Oasis really captured that.
They were they were the big name in this, wasn't they? Weren't they? I mean, there were a lot of guitar-based bands, weren't there, in the 90s, and we called it Britpop, didn't we? Britpop was the kind of name.
This kind of Blur, Oasis, Pulp, very much captivated. It was very much an indie scene as well. There was indie music that then became Britpop. Indie is independent, sort of away from a record label, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And this kind of became this kind of it was a real resurgence of almost that aggression of the 60s and 70s when bands like Oasis, which I really loved. But I do have a soft spot in my heart for, I have a place in my heart for Metallica, who are American. So that era. And that's what I kind of love as well. That kind of compensated for me for the 80s. But I did, as I've got older, I've started to appreciate bands like The Cure, and I've always liked The Cure. Right?
Love The Cure.
Yeah. But that's it's interesting. And then we move on to the 90s, and for me, the 2000s was more about dance music.
Yeah.
The clubbing music. Everyone was going to Ibiza in the 2000s, kind of these kind of things. And then we had a lot of European music as well. There were a lot of Italian artists, Spanish artists, and Dutch artists that were kind of sort of adding to this amazing collection of dance music and clubbing music. And often the words were in English, so you didn't really realize where they were from. Sometimes I get shocked. They're like, "Oh, this band is this artist is Italian." I'm like, "Oh, I thought he was English." So things like that. And then and then after that, it's kind of, for me, as I've got older, you know more modern artists than I do. I think. I mean, my musical knowledge kind of ends at kind of Ed Sheeran and Adele. And I think because your kids are slightly older, they're kind of introducing you to music. But you mentioned earlier a Welsh band called Stereophonics. Brilliant band. But there were others as well. Bullet for My Valentine. Have you heard of those?
No, I haven't. No.
Absolutely amazing. Really heavy metal band, thrash metal. Really kind of, for me, like took that element of Slayer and kind of Metallica that I loved, and it was a kind of Welsh version, British version of them, and also Manic Street Preachers. Amazing band. I've seen those live, and when we say see them live, it's when we see them in concert. Um, we and
Yeah.
and sometimes they're not just live at a concert; they could be live at a festival.
Mm.
Have you
Yes,
ever been to a festival?
I have. I mean, festivals have grown and grown in the
Yeah,
UK, as everywhere else, I expect. There are so many different festivals now. I mean, obviously, the most famous one, which is just finished in the UK, is Glastonbury.
yeah,
That's a massive, massive music festival. Basically, you get to see lots and lots of bands, don't you, at a festival? It's
yeah.
not just one band or singer performing, lots of others. I've been to a festival called Latitude, which is a
Okay.
more gentler kind of festival, but still lots going on. They've got different music stages. They also have comedians, um,
Okay. Where is
storytellers.
Latitude?
Latitude in Suffolk, in the east of
Where is it?
England. But I've seen the Stereophonics play there. They headline. They were the headline
Nice,
act, so the main
nice.
act, and various other people I've seen play there as well. But yeah, so a festival's a good way to see lots of music in one place, isn't it?
So a festival, as we say, a festival is an event, usually over 2 or 3 days, a
Mm.
weekend festival kind of thing. And you can have a comedy festival, but it's often related to music. And you often have a number of stages with a lot of different musical artists. And like you said, another kind of key piece of vocabulary, headline. The headline act is the kind of main artist on each of the days. I think this year the headline act at the Isle of Wight Festival on the Sunday was Justin Timberlake, and my wife was desperate, but sadly she couldn't get a ticket. And I need, if Justin Timberlake's watching this, please
Mm.
give me a call. Give me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to be honest, you could have my ticket if you want. If I had one, that wouldn't be my must see act. Interestingly,
Yeah,
I say Glastonbury just finished. Olivia Rodrigo, American singer, was
yeah,
headlining there, but she had a special guest on stage, and that was Robert Smith from The Cure. So they did a duet together,
yes,
which is fantastic.
amazing. Yeah. So I'd never been to Glastonbury, but I've been to the Isle of Wight festival a few
Mm.
times. That's more of a family friendly festival. There's a lot of kids go there and things like this. And I've also been to Reading Festival a few
Yes.
times when I was younger. I saw Metallica. They were the
Hmm.
headline act of Metallica. It was one of the best moments of my life. And I've seen a lot of big bands, the kind of metal bands. They usually have a day devoted to kind of metal and rock. People like
Mm.
Slipknot and System of a Down, who are
Oh,
not
right.
from
Yeah.
Britain, but
What
things like
about
that. But I
what about
absolutely love.
Ozzy Osbourne? He's a great British export, isn't he, in music?
He's fantastic. Black Sabbath,
Black Sabbath.
an
Yeah.
amazing, amazing rock band. I love them. I was a bit too young to appreciate Black Sabbath until I got older, which
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense. And I was kind of very much into. It took me a while to learn more about Black Sabbath, but when I did, I loved
Mhm.
Black Sabbath. But I was more into kind of Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd when I got into that era, and then of course the Rolling Stones. But I was very much Led Zepp, Pink Floyd as a kid.
Mhm.
Um, and things like, and the Kinks as well. Gotta mention
Kinks.
the
Yeah.
Kinks, a
Yeah.
brilliant
Yeah.
band. But yes, and then I kind of got into. I must say, my first love with the Kinks, and the second band that I really got into, Prodigy, after Metallica. So it
Kinks.
was
Yeah.
like Kinks, Metallica, Prodigy. Do you remember the Prodigy?
I do.
They
Firestarter.
Twisted Firestarter. They changed their just sounded like Alan Partridge there, didn't I? They changed their name from Prodigy to the Prodigy, or the other way around. I can't remember which way. But they started off as kind of a dance um sort of act, and they
Yeah.
became much more kind of uh, there was a lot more variety to their music.
Mhm.
But they had some absolute bangers, as the kids would say, or absolute tunes, as
Yeah.
they would say. So we've talked about quite a lot of vocabulary. One thing we need to mention: concert. You can also say informally a gig. A gig is a live performance.
Yeah.
So I'm going to a gig tonight at the local venue. I'm going to see an Oasis gig and things like that. So gig
Yeah.
is one of those. But the other thing we need to say, there's a few more pieces of vocabulary we need to talk about. Backstage
Yeah.
is behind the curtains, if you like, what happens backstage. And sometimes we hear stories of bands backstage. In the 60s, they were destroying things. And I know these days it seems a lot more sedate backstage. But we didn't talk about Queen.
How can we
Brilliant
forget
band.
Queen?
Absolute stadium, like phenomenal. You know, you see, I would love to, you know, I wish I could go back in time, watch maybe Elvis Presley, Queen, the Who when they had Keith Moon on the drums, Led Zeppelin back in the day. Oh my goodness! But yeah, Queen. I would love to have seen Queen.
Yes, yeah. And interestingly, I'd be the same, but it's a question maybe for our audience. Do we have any bands these days that would draw such a big crowd and such an international sort of huge success like that? I don't know.
The reason I laughed is because it sounds like that start of like music these days. It's not what it was when I was a kid. I think you know that's the thing, isn't it? I think everybody kind of we sort of tap out, which means kind of we end. To tap out is often of a fight or a kind of thing. To tap out, it's a boxing, like a martial arts term or a boxing term. To tap, you're ending the fight. We often tap out of our music, sort of music taste, at a certain period, and I think mine ended around 2000s, something like that. And then after that, I'm like, music these days. But I do like Ed Sheeran, although my wife, I don't tell my wife.
No.
I've got a soft spot for Ed Sheeran, but yeah, I'd love to know modern bands that you love as well. I'd love to hear about that. But we've really kind of talked a lot of vocabulary related to music. British bands. There are so many others we could talk about. If you do want to support this podcast a little bit more, you could always buy a cup of tea for one of us or both of us if you choose, and we'll keep drinking tea and we'll keep talking. But do that. Please let us know any other things you'd like to watch. But from me today, I just want to say, Rob, thank you very much for joining me today to talk about music. And I'll see you in the next podcast.
It's been fun, Roy. Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.